All right, so let's go back to Vayikra chapter 6. We're dealing with the theme of to command, Tsav. And it actually does pick up on verse 8 and 9. And so when we see this word Tsav, command, what common question I always ask every week, what themes do you all see? What ideas are repeated? What principles can we extract as we deal with this particular portion called Tsav? What do we see commanded? What do we see as principle? What reoccurs throughout this particular portion?
Well, I guess I was thinking a lot of while you were speaking is the law of the burnt offering, and it said because it will be burning all night unto the morning, and that the fire, the importance of the fire, that it should be burning. And then secondly, the clothing of the priest being of linen keeps them clean, just like we were talking, brother was talking about. After 3 days, you weren't, able to consume the meat. We spoke earlier about that linen having a natural way of being an antibacterial agent, and holiness, a symbol of holiness, but also it's a cleanly garment. So I would say the principle is cleanliness and keeping the fire burning, that this is a constant act that must be done.
Here's another question regarding linen. What is linen made from?
Cotton, isn't it?
It's not cotton.
Is it made
It's
from
flax.
It's what, Ima?
Flax?
It's flax. So this is a plant-based clothing.
Flaxseed.
Flaxseed,
Right.
like flaxseed?
I do believe so.
Wow.
Or the flax, the flax stems or branches or something. I don't know what it looks like.
Wow, I never knew that. That's heavy.
Linen is a durable natural fiber derived from the flax plant. The finest linen comes from Europe and specifically from Belgium, where an optimal climate and rich soil allows for strong, beautiful flax. With Belgian linen, you'll experience bedding with higher quality fiber. So this is a fiber, okay? It is a fiber. And so when we think of this, this is something that is very interesting as relates to covering, because we know covering, particularly for Adam and Hawa, was done with animal skin. When they tried to use plant skin or the fig leaves to cover themselves up, that was not acceptable because there was sin present. So that could not cover them. However, as we read what Yahushua said, he didn't come for the righteous to call them to repentance. He came from the sinners. If you're righteous, you already are covered in the commandments because that's what you're keeping to remain righteous. With the flaxseed or the linen, that's just giving you an additional covering. And it's more of a lively fabric that has a higher, resonance, a higher vibratory rate associated with it. And so that allows for the conductivity of energy to flow through you more readily, as opposed to dead animal skin. Now it's so deep because we know that cotton, right, is a plant. Wool is actually a a byproduct of an animal, right? And it's more of a thicker one. But when you think of like cotton and you think of linen particularly, you're dealing with fibers from plants. So it's a whole different resonance that it has related to it. Yes, Brother Kim, your hand is up. I see it.
Yes, sir. Certain things came to mind when you were talking about this linen. I never knew that that's where linen came from. I always thought it came from cotton. But anyway, when I think about linen, the material itself, it's a lot cooler. It's a lot more comfortable, right?
Right.
Yeah, and something else that I was going to say. Yeah, and it's a lot more durable.
It's breathable too.
Breathable. That's why I was saying, when you, it's a lot more comfortable when, that's one of the most comfortable. I used to cut grass and landscaping, and one of the coolest things that you can wear shirt-wise while you're doing landscaping is linen.
Wow.
Yeah, not cotton, but linen. Yeah.
You breathe. Yep. Say loud. Okay. Okay. Someone else has their hand up. Imalioria, yes, ma'am.
Another thing about linen that I found out, years ago, I was taking care of my mom. I really didn't find this out until later. But linen, actually, I guess our bed sheets and all used to be linen. I guess hence the word linen for your, for sheets. And that. But a person that is sick, that linen is the best fabric for, like for the elderly or anyone that's bedridden.
Right.
It helps to minimize, the skin being damaged. So I was, we were looking at this, some of the sisters about changing our clothing because of the polyesters and stuff. So we should be making every attempt. Very hard to find pure linen because it's very expensive.
It is. It's a little more fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And interestingly, this is also something we talked about with the mixed garments. Like we should not wear mixed garments because they lower the vibratory rate as well. And so when we deal with more pure fabric, it's going to allow the vibratory rate to elevate. But looking at this here, it says the garments of fine linen are truths from the divine. This is because a garment made of fine linen was of purest white and lustrous. And truth from the divine is represented by garments of such whiteness and luster. The reason is that the shining whiteness and luster of heaven is from the light that is from the Most High. And this light is the divine truth itself. And therefore, when Yah was transfigured before Peter, James, and John, his garments appeared as the light, shining, exceeding white as snow, so as no fuller on earth can whiten them, and glistening. It was the divine truth itself, that it is from Yah's divine human, that was thus represented. Yet it is exterior truths that are represented by the white radiance of garments in the heavens, and interior truths by the brightness and resplendence of his face. Hence, it is that to be clothed in garments of fine linen is here an external significance or significative of the truth proceeding from the celestial of the spirit. For it was in this that the divine of the Most High then was. Selah. So that has a very significant spiritual representation dealing with fine linen as the truth is being conducted. This is what the priest is really conducting, is a ceremony of conveying the truth of the matter in the purity of life, in the imperishability and incorruptibility of nature as it was intended to be. Because again, here's the question. What was the purpose of the Levitical sacrificial system? Why was it brought forth? Why was the
Offer-
Levitical? Go ahead.
to give gifts to the Lord, to Yah,
Okay.
offer gifts to Yah. The sacrifices were presented.
Okay. So keep in mind, even when you go back to Adam, there were sacrifices that were offered during his day as well. What delineates the sacrifices that Adam offered, that Jacob offered, that Abraham offered, right? As opposed to what Moses and now Aaron are offering. Are there any distinctions between those offerings that are done?
Well, I would say that most of the blessings that the offerings like with Abraham and them, they were more Thanksgiving or more praise offerings. I get better what
Okay.
I can come up with right now. And with the Levitical offerings, or what they call Levitical, but these offerings and things here, they pointed to the Messiah. If which, if I can only speculate, because at this time he was still trying to redeem Israel back to him, because they were still in a fallen state at that time. Am I correct?
Something like that. You can definitely point to that, because what is about the Messiah that is so significant in his manifestation, or his advent?
Well, they had to. With the Messiah, he had to fulfill a prophecy that was
Okay.
given, back in Genesis. When
I got to leave.
Go ahead.
Oh, I got my mute. Apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I thought, but he had to fulfill a prophecy. He had to fulfill his word. You know, with Adam and Eve, what took place with them. Even though, you know, there were some things that he told Mother Eve that was going to take place, as far as her being redeemed in childbearing and things of that nature. But he also spoke to her seed, right? And your seed shall bruise his head, and his seed shall bruise your heel, right? But there was a lot of other things that transpired, right? Well, with those things transpiring, and with the initial sin of Israel, back during the time of Noah, when they were taking on daughters and wives, sons and daughters to be their husbands and their wives. That's what sent them off into slavery the first time in Egypt. Am I correct?
You have some bearing.
Yeah, and so, because there was a reason for them going there, right? And so I think once he brought them out of there into humble Egypt, or the humble Pharaoh, right? The Levitical, the offerings and things of that was for an atonement for the sins of the fathers.
Boom. There you go. So what Levitical sacrificial system was really instituted for was for atonement.
That's what I said. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Very much so. And this is very important for us to understand how the Mashiyach, or the Messiah's works, or his offering, was that of an atoning nature. But it was his life that we are to epitomize, because, again, where there is no sin or no guilt, there is no offering that is needed. So the free will offerings, the Thanksgiving offering that you talked about, the elevation offering, Brother Kim, are the offerings that Yah desires, right? The sin and guilt offering, those were only instituted as a result to mitigate and ultimately remedy and rectify the blemishes of human nature as a result of the golden calf, particularly, okay? This is when the Levitical priesthood comes into place, is after the golden calf. You don't see a Levitical priesthood prior to that. You see a order of Melchizedek, a Melchizedekian priesthood. And so when you have the institution of sin and death offerings, guilt and sin offerings, this is a new type of sin, a new type of offering that was brought forth for the nation of Israel. And so, as we're dealing with the burnt offering here, right, you're seeing that this fire as well is brought forth and related to this particular offering, that this fire is continually kept burning on the altar. It is not put out, verse 13, 12 and 13. What is that signifying there? What is the signification of this fire on the altar kept burning, not put out? And this is said twice, right? What is the significance of that?
Could it be temperance?
Okay, that's a part of it. Explain what you mean by temperance, though.
So the offering, obedience, denying of self. So temperance is just abstaining from, abstaining from those things that can defile the body.
Say loud. Okay. How would one go about deriving temperance then? Where do you get that particular principle from? Where does it come from?
I think it's more, if I'm answering the question, it's more long lasting if it's due out of relationship, not just because of obligation.
Okay. Say loud. Good word. Good word. Torah for that. Brother Kim, what say you?
What I got from it, and the fire on the altar is kept burning on it, it is not put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning and arrange to burn. Well, the one thing that I got from that, and then it says it again, fires continually kept burning. And the first thing that came to my mind was that scripture says that the Father is an all-consuming fire. And he can't be distinguished. That's the one thing that I get, in that the fire, the purifying fire, right? That, when he comes in, he said there's one who baptizes, Messiah said there's one who baptizes with water, but I'm going to, he's one that, who was that? John the Baptist said, I baptize with water, but there's one who baptizes with fire.
Right, the spirit of fire.
Excuse me, sir. Hello?
Okay. Can you hear?
Oh, I can hear you now. Yeah, you kind of faded out there.
Okay, I was just saying with the spirit and fire. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so the fire representing the Holy Spirit, or the Ruach Kadesh.
That's good. That's good as well. That's good as well. So these are very, very pertinent principles: temperance, the Holy Spirit. But they all coincide. But when you think about it as well, adding on to that, this is about our worship for Yah. Our worship for Yah should be continual. What else does Scripture say should be continual in our activity? What should we do without ceasing?
Prayer and law.
Okay, prayer and law, right? Observing the law in a continuous prayer. So those two there with the Torah allow for us to derive temperance, right? So the relationship that you were speaking about, Brother Duran, is derived from our understanding of how to relate to the Most High through his word. Because here's the issue. A relationship is based on what? Well, let me ask the question. What would best solidify a relationship? What should be the defining
Faithfulness.
but how do you even come to that particular point in terms of understanding how to relate faithfully? You have to have something that is important that connects that. Like, what connects that faithfulness?
I would say a stable or a committed relationship, like you come into your presence of each other
So
regularly.
let's do this. And that's true. And that, what does that build and create, Ima?
That creates a relationship or a love or understanding of each other, right?
So let's do this. let's look at chapter 4. So that there is important, but this is where we have the defining principle right here. This is Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, and it's the first phrase of it, because this is where everything is built on. It says, Adam knew Hawa, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in relationship truly is best understood through the knowledge of the other. The intimacy is derived from knowledge. The more you know your significant other, your spouse, the more you'll be able to relate to them. If you don't know your spouse, how can you relate to your spouse? Right? And so this is what allows for agreement. The more knowledgeable we are of things, this is what it works for us and Yah as well. Knowledge, I would argue, even when we go to the Levitical system and this fire that we're talking about now, because if you don't know how to keep that altar lit and burning, it's not going to burn. You have to have the right knowledge on how to arrange the burnt offering, right? So these principles here are very important. Yeah, 500. Before we go to the movie. Are very important as relates to how we are to go about keeping these fires lit, because here it is. The Torah becomes that within us that burns up anything that is impure. Once we have Torah thoughts, any thought that is contrary to Torah is burned up. Once we receive the written word on our heart. And then the prayer that we offer up to the Most High with meditation, I would add that as well, also fans that flame of passion and zeal for Yah according to knowledge. Yes, Imali Araya.
Yeah, I have a note that says in my Bible, it says something interesting that in Leviticus, the fire which only manifests the sweet savor of the burnt and the meal and the peace offering, that fire, which is a sweet savor, it also wholly consumes the whole part of the sin offering. It's like, as you said, there's a fire that was continually going, but it was just like this fire to me accommodated everything. It accommodated the sweet savor, like it simmered at sometimes. It allowed them to burn the meal, but it also allowed them to bake the unleavened cakes.
Right.
And then for the sin offering, man, that whole animal had to be consumed with fire down to ashes.
Right. So this fire is very significant. This is the basis of all the worship, particularly for the temple. The fire is what allowed for everything in the temple to function. Be it the fire of the altar, be it the fire of the menorah, or be it the fire of the Shekhinah, of the presence of Yah between the cherubim. So one way or another, fire was a central element to the worship system that Yah gave to Israel. The question is, how do we apply this to our life today? What is the altar for us today?
I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that question again?
What is the altar for us today?
Seat of consciousness, the mind.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. Anyone else have anything to add to it?
I mean, because we won't have a physical altar until the second coming, correct? Until the temple.
Well, until the temple is rebuilt.
So it would have to be, yeah, the seat of consciousness, the mind, because that's where the most holies is, or the holy of holies.
So when we look at this, the sacrificial altar, it forms the Messiah's temple man's feet, also symbolizing the Messiah's feet and footstool, as was the custom of that time. Okay, so what we're looking at here, altar of sacrifice, symbolizes the feet, the footstool. Okay, but this really also, well, let me ask this: the feet move based on what though? What causes the feet to move?
The legs.
I mean, in terms of, yeah, like mobility wise, but your feet are responding to something. What are your feet
Your
responding to?
mind,
Your mind or your heart?
also.
Exactly. Right. And so when we comprehend that, we can see that the feet are only demonstrating the thoughts of the heart. So all this really comes back, as we were saying earlier, to the heart. Because if our hearts are for Yah, well, the altar sacrifice that our feet are demonstrating, because we're offering ourselves, we're presenting ourselves through our movement of our feet to whatever it is we're serving, based on the conditions of our heart. And so we can see what we're worshiping based on where we're going, how we're spending our time, what we are engaging in, who we're engaging ourselves with, right? So that is very indicative of how to keep this altar lit on what we're doing today. And it really comes down to, most importantly, what are we doing? One of the key words in Israel as relates to the overall system and the goals of this system of Torah observance is right conduct. And they call that orthopraxy, right? And we've talked about this a little bit. Orthopraxy is about all right practice. Orthopraxy is the correct conduct, both ethical and liturgical, as opposed to faith or grace. This is very important. Let me go and read this. This is huge. As opposed to faith or grace, orthopraxy is the correct conduct, right? This is based on knowledge. Orthopraxy is in contrast with orthodoxy, which emphasizes correct belief, and ritualism, the practice of rituals. This word is a neoclassical compound, meaning right practice. While orthodoxies make use of codified beliefs in the form of creeds, and ritualism more narrowly centers on the strict adherence to prescribed rites or ritus. Orthopraxy is focused on issues of family, cultural integrity, the transmission of tradition, sacrificial offerings, concerns of purity, and the ethical system and the enforcement thereof. In Hinduism, orthopraxy and ritualism are not easily disentangled. Judaism and Christianity are also considered both a religion and orthopraxy, as it guides its adherents in both practice and belief. This is so important as relates to understanding the fire that we are to have continuously burning, because what it will produce is the right practice in our life. Because we're going to serve Yah. How are we called to serve Yah? If we worship Yah, how are we to worship Yah? What two principles?
Spirit and in truth.
In spirit and in truth. And so if we're worshiping Yah in spirit, that means the fruits of the spirit should be present, right?
Hallelujah.
And if we're worshiping Yah in truth, that means his word should govern us, because we know in John 17, Yahushua says, keep them in your truth. Your word is truth. So this is what we look forward to. This is how we keep these fires burning, in that we're studying, we're praying, we're meditating, but most importantly, we're conducting ourselves properly. We're producing the right fruit. And that is what's going to allow these fires to be fanned in zeal. Just to verify this point, let's look at Romans 10 right quick. And we've read this several times in these past few weeks. Romans 10 says this, verses 1 through 4. Truly, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to Elohim is for Israel's deliverance. For I bear them witness that they have an ardor, they have a fire for Elohim, but not according to knowledge. This is why knowledge is so important. If we're going to worship Yah, we have to worship Yah really with the right understanding, with the right knowledge, to produce the right actions. For not knowing the righteousness of Elohim and seeking to establish their own righteousness, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of Elohim. For Messiah is the goal of the Torah unto righteousness to everyone who believes. So this should be our goal. The Messiah, we should be walking as Messiah. Everyone who has been immersed in Messiah has put on the Messiah, right? And so knowing what the Messiah is doing and how he went about doing it, how did he go about getting the mind of Yah? Well, that is because he became one with Torah. And so that is where those fires are actually enhanced and inflamed. So this is a very important and central part of what this is talking about. Anybody have anything to add on to that? Any insight, any comments or questions or anything?
Well, I had one question, and maybe you can kind of clear. When you were talking about the religion, when you were reading that part, right?
Okay.
And I made a statement. I was talking to a couple of friends earlier part of this week, and I made the statement that I am a religious person. Well, I have a religion, which is actually a culture. It's a way of life, right?
Okay.
And I was just, if you could speak on this, how is it that religion has gotten such a ugly word when all it really is ritual in the things that you believe?
Culture, right?
Your culture, right? And
Right.
because the word doctrine, if you will, you remember when it talks about the doctrine, isn't that the same thing as the religion? I guess it's a question.
In a sense, it is. I'm of the mind of what Miles Monroe said. Miles Monroe, peace be upon him, he said that the Father gave us a kingdom. He didn't give us a religion, right? Because what you're dealing with religion, you can deal with people changing things, right? But Yah gave his people commandments, right ruling statutes and laws and principles, right? And so when we understand that in the significance of obedience, in the sense that we are to adhere to the laws of the kingdom, it transcends religion. It becomes just the national way of life. It is the culture. And yes, it is a culture. Religion can be considered a culture as well. However, I believe it transcends that. Shabbat shalom to you and yours, Nicola. Welcome. However, religion has gotten so relative.
Right.
And watered down, very much so, which is why the Mashiach's first miracle was what was taking place if he transformed water into wine, because he brought back the potency of the teaching.
That's tight. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hallelujah. Yes, indeed. But this is the reality of what we're dealing with today. And I'm not a big fan of Karl Marx, but Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the people. And that's why people are so passive today, because they're religious. They're not spiritually aware. They're more religiously indoctrinated. They're indoctrinated. So when you talk about doctrine, we have to beware of different doctrines, because if it's not the true doctrine and people are believing what bishop or prophet or evangelist so-and-so is saying, pastor so-and-so is saying, they're going to be caught up in the mouth of that bishop and that talker as opposed to what the word is actually saying.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry for my, sometimes when it hit me like that, but I'm sorry. Yeah.
But this is why it's imperative for us individually. So this is speaking to every individual to personally keep these fires lit. You have to do that.
Okay, I understand. I understand the difference. I see it a little bit clearer now. Yeah, you had to bring that water down back to some potency. I
Yes,
like
sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
That's right. I like that.
And so during this time, again, with the Levitical order, this was only a familial or bloodline type of priesthood that could carry out the functions and duties prescribed. No one else could officiate in the temple whatsoever. No one could come into the holy place or the Holy of Holies but someone who was of Levitical ancestry. Okay. And so this really limited access to this particular matter. Whereas in the beginning, what was Yah's intent? What was Yah's intent as relates to priesthood?
He wanted everyone to be able to have access to him.
Exactly. This was a national imperative.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the golden calf excised 11 tribes from priesthood. It cut off 11 tribes from access to priesthood. Just like when they said, Moses, you speak with us, lest Yah speak with us and we die. They cut off their prophetic capacity. So Israel has a tendency to cut themselves off, to cut ourselves off from accessing that which Yah has given us for an inheritance. And so this is the way to restore this. When we look at the principles of the sacrificial system, it's about restoration. It's about transformation, and I would even say transmutation from base to pristine, or from base to holy, right? This is about presenting ourselves holy. You see that when an offering is brought up and it's eaten, it has to be eaten with unleavened bread. What does unleavened bread symbolize?
Sin.
Unleavened bread?
I mean, purity.
Purity. There's no sin. Anytime you're dealing with unleavened bread, you're dealing with the absence of the ego, which is where sin derives from. Your own ego, your own thoughts, your own desires. So the ego is tempered. That's a great word that you use, Brother Duran. Your ego is tempered, and you no longer are dealing with just your own thoughts and your own ideas. Your principles are now from heaven. And you're fellowshipping with those of like mind. You're eating this in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. And so every male had an opportunity to eat of this most holy and sacred meat, right? This meal. And it's interesting here, a law forever in your generations concerning the offerings made by fire to Yah, all that touches them is to be set apart. This is about holiness. If you're going to eat this meat, yes, how you had to present yourself.
Holy.
Exactly. Just like when we're dealing with Pesach, which is coming up. It says, examine yourselves before taking this meal. This is why many of you are sick and weak, because you're not eating it in the right state of being. Here's the question. What is holiness? What is set apartness?
One thing that I would say holiness is, and having a set apart spirit, is not actively sinning.
That's a good word.
Actively pursuing through prayer, meditation, fasting, always always crucifying self. And what
Okay.
I mean by that is always being willing to kill part of that old nature, the things that have kept you disconnected or on the outside of the congregation, that sin, those thoughts that are impure, those things, those thoughts and words that are not aligning to the Torah, that does not line up with the will and mindset, the will of the Most High, and the mindset of the Messiah. Those are the things that I believe that holiness or set apartness is being anything that is contrary to this world. Like you said once before, and I was thinking about this. I think about it ever since you said it, right? Is ingesting the Torah, eating the
Yes.
Torah. You know what I mean?
Bread.
Yes, sir. The bread of life, and feasting on that daily. I think keeping our minds set on things higher,
Right.
most high. That's how I think that holiness it comes about. Now, do we ever really fully achieve that? It's still for up to debate but I believe it's possible. I believe that perfection, that is perfection to me. I believe once we walking truly in the knowledge of the Most High, and using heavenly wisdom, godly insight, and just knowing and just living a pure life, seeing everything in a pure eye, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even when it comes down to your water that you drink, the water that you bathe in, just like with the priest, everything was specific. I believe that our lives should be just that specific.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So the human soul in the temple. I want to read this real quick, just to add on even to what you're saying. It says tradition teaches that the human soul has 5 levels, right? Hebraic consciousness understands there are 5 levels to our soul, of which the lower 3 are connected to our physical selves. And it is these 3 that concern us here. At the core of our being, we are neshama, okay, which is always connected to Yah to such a great extent that it is difficult to tell where the divine presence ends and where the person begins. The holiness should always reflect Yah's presence, first and foremost. The more holy we are, the more of a profound presence of Yah should be upon us, okay? Although our neshama is the core of our being, we are not self-conscious on the level of neshama. We are only self-conscious on the bottom 2 levels of our soul, which is the ruach and the nefesh. The neshama is connected to our ruach, our spiritual self. We are all self-aware as spiritual beings. We can all imagine ourselves as living without our bodies, and we all have a sense of morality and a right and wrong that we know is above all materialistic considerations. The ruach is connected to our nefesh, the life force that burns within us and is the engine that drives us, the materialistic part of our being. So the ruach is that life force. The spirit, somebody mentioned that, Brother Kim, you did. The spirit is that fire burn within us. But we have to cultivate that, okay? The temple is put together in the same way. The outermost level is called the Azara, and that is where the animal sacrifices are all brought. This level parallels the Nefesh. It is connected to the Hakal, which is the sanctuary, which is a more spiritual place. No animal sacrifices are ever offered in the sanctuary. Nothing is ever brought to the sanctuary or offered there. It's all offered outside. The incense is offered in the sanctuary, and this is where the menorah is also to be found. The holy bread that stays warm and fresh from Shabbat. Shabbat is there. It is clearly a more spiritual part of the temple, but we still have daily access to it, just as we do to our own spirituality. This levels parallels the Ruach. So the sacrifice that we have to offer up is our fleshly nature, right? But when we get to our spirit, there's no offering that is to take place there. And this is where Abraham entered into that. We talked about this last week, that Abraham mastered himself so much that he no longer was in need of addressing his animal nature because he had mastered his animal nature. So there was no offering that was even needed to be made because he had mastered it. So finally, within the innermost recesses of the sanctuary is the Holy of Holies, a separate alcove that is curtained off. So it's behind the veil, and it's something that we have to the mind comes into it. The Holy Ark is kept there, and this is the place of the Shekhinah, or the presence of Yah, that he inhibits or inhabits. We do not have daily access to this part of the temple at all. The only person who ever enters it is the high priest, and even he is only allowed to enter once a year. What day does he enter the Holy of Holies?
Day of
What day?
Atonement.
The Day of Atonement. Yom Kippur is the only day that that particular alcove is open. Okay, so this lack of access is clearly an existential expression of our own lack of access to our own neshama and neshamot. The symbolism is clear. The high priest who enters the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur must enter it on the level of neshama, which is the highest level, not the highest level, excuse me. But we must become neshama. We must become the beings that hear as well, because you can hear Shema in there, right? They are obedient. Life is problematic only because we are not really sure about how to define ourselves. Again, we don't have the accurate knowledge of who we are. Going back to that fire. Were we able to see ourselves clearly as Neshamot, and were we therefore conscious of our unbreakable attachment to Yah, the point of our lives would be quite clear to us. We wouldn't be at all confused as to why we exist and what we are supposed to do with our lives. But Yah decreed that we must live with free will, and therefore the awareness of how our life depends on our attachment to Elohim at the source of our beings is withheld from our self-consciousness. Instead, we are placed in a situation of existential conflict, of raging life force, the nefesh, and our spiritual side, the ruach, always contending with each other, pulling us in different directions. This ceaseless conflict confuses us. None of us are sure of who we are and what we are. No one wants to deny their real selves and live the wrong life. Our confusion about who we are is the source of our sins. So again, this knowledge is so important. If we know that we are children of Elohim and Elohim does not sin, then we too know that once we are born of Elohim, as 1 John 4 says, or 3, excuse me, we would not sin either. But this eternal confusion is the dilemma that forms the backdrop against which we must exercise our free will to choose life, as Deuteronomy 30 tells us. Our state of oblivion regarding the existence of our neshama, the highest level of our soul that is always attached to Elohim, renders us incapable of reaching clarity about who we are and clearing up our confusion. Stepping into the Holy of Holies means becoming self-conscious as neshamot. Holiness is equated to the consciousness of who we are as beings of neshama. Okay, and when we deal with neshama, let's see if we can find where this word comes from. Actually, let's do this. So neshama, the neshama, which is the mind here, the mochin de imah, the little mother, is Moses, as states in the Gemara that Moses married Bina. So this is now dealing more with the mind, okay? Nefesh is dealing with the breath, ruach, Nefesh is dealing with more so the body, the ruach is dealing with the spirit, neshama is dealing with the mind, okay? So when we're dealing with the state of neshama, we're more in the mind because we're aware of who we are. Holiness is a mind state. That's the point that I wanted to get to. Holiness is a state of mind. Okay? When we become holy, we become aware of what is required for us to be in that state of being. Now, here's the question. Here's another question. What makes us holy? What makes us holy?
Maybe our willingness to be obedient
To what, Iman?
to yeah.
But through his what? Through
word.
what? Through his word, exactly. The keeping of the commandment sanctifies us, right? So this is what Yahushua said in John 17. Matter of fact, let's just look at it. He says, set them apart, sanctify them, make them holy through your truth, through your word. Set them apart in your truth. Make them holy in your truth. Your word is truth. Psalm 119, 142. That's my favorite song. Psalm 119 is really my favorite chapter in the whole Torah, the whole book, because it just has so much. Psalm 119, 142. Your righteousness is righteousness forever, and your Torah is truth, right? And then it goes to 151. You are near, oh Yah, and all your commands are true. So the commands, remember, Yahushua said, set them apart in your truth. Set them apart in your commandments, right? Set them apart in his righteousness. Now, righteousness, we know, again, according to Torah, Deuteronomy 6, verse 24, it tells us that righteousness, 5:25, righteousness for us is when we guard to do all this command before Yah Elohim as he has commanded us, right? When he commands us to do all these laws, when we keep them, when we guard them, that is when we become righteous. What's the difference between self-righteous and righteousness? What's the difference?
One is of the Most High, and one is of self.
Hold on, 3 people talking. I'm gonna let this young man speak real quick, and I want you all to hear him.
Go ahead.
Righteousness? Righteousness means you know the truth and you stand up for yourself. Righteousness is that you follow the right people and then you become a leader on your own and then make people follow you and teach them how to become a leader. And it's like a food chain. Yeah, it's like you become a leader. I mean, you become a follower for the good people, the righteousness people, not the wicked. If you become with the wicked people, you'll get yourself in trouble by y'all or person.
Was that you about to speak?
Amen. No, I was saying amen, but I was thinking about self-righteousness is when we equate our righteousness unto knowledge of self.
Mm.
You know, knowledge of what we think is right. And righteousness is by, you know, the word of Yah more so.
And he also said, our righteousness is as a filthy rag. What, you know,
Right.
what
right.
can we do? What type of righteousness could we ever have? You know,
Right.
what is it built on? A filthy rag.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Brother Kim, what were you gonna say?
Sort of like what the elders were saying, you know, self-righteousness is of self. You ever heard them people say that, you know, have a God of your own understanding?
Uh-huh.
or God as you understanding, that's self-righteousness, right? But righteousness is of the Most High. Or you have people say that God knows your heart, and he knows who I am, and he created me this way, and that's just justification. So anything that self does is okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's that type of stuff. You know, can't nobody judge me, but the word says something. You know, that type of stuff. That's self-right.
Only God can judge me. Okay.
Yeah, that's the biggest lie they've ever told. But go ahead. You know, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's what I. Yeah.
Say la. You might leave right.
You know what came to my mind too was that prayer of the man that says, I fast and I give and all of this. I don't do like the other people do.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. And it just comes down to pride in you.
Mm-hmm. Pride in you.
So when you have this huge sense of pride for who you are and what you do, in the sense that it's about you, and not that Yah has allowed you to do this, right? Even let's take Job. Job's issue, in fact, when we read his book and Yah rebukes him, is self-righteousness. That's Job's whole issue. Like, I've never sinned. I've never done. Oh, for real? Keep in mind, Job is one of the counselors that told Pharaoh to enslave the children of Israel, according to the book of Jasher. So when you're dealing with self-righteousness, this is about a perspective of yourself that, you know, you can't do any wrong. I'm never wrong. As opposed to being righteous, which is humble and keeping the commandments of the Most High. And this deals with holiness too. It's relative to holiness in the sense that holiness is about, you know, submission. Holiness is about order. Holiness is about faithfulness and obedience. Selah, Selah. Well, chapter 6 has a lot in it. We're dealing with grain offerings again. Grain offering, of course. What is the grain offering relative to? What's the mystery of the grain offering? What is grain? What is grain related to? What is the symbolic representation of grain?
Bread.
Which is?
Life.
Which is?
The Messiah.
And the Messiah is the incarnate what?
Word.
The Torah, exactly. So when we're dealing with the grain offering, we're dealing with the Torah. We're dealing with the word of Yah. Okay, you're dealing with that offering of the word back to Yah. You're bringing it back to Yah. When Yah gives you the commandment, you return it to Yah. That is what Revelation 19 is really talking about. This wedding feast, where the true words of Elohim are presented, is about those who receive the invitation and have received it and returned to it, right? Blessed are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these, which are those who have been called to the marriage supper of the Lamb, are the true words of Elohim. That's the offering. You're returning the offering. You're bringing this offering with fire back to Yah. That's what's taking place. So this grain offering is symbolic of the word being represented to Yah through us at its highest. And this is where you got to see it for what it really is all about. Right? And this grain offering is completely burned, it's not eaten. And then they do get into the sin offering of the Torah of there, while the atonement is made, right? And anything that it touches has to be set apart because it has to be able to atone for that which was the misstep. Now keep in mind, sin has an idea of missing the mark. but this missing the mark is done accidentally. Come on, please. No, come on. Y'all gonna eat these pistachios. I gotta eat them over there. This, y'all gonna get all this over here. On the leather over there. Y'all making a mess. Look at this. Sleek out, Mishpachah. I'm sorry about that. Messiah, you come and go. You need no more. You can get yourself. Come sit down. Yes, you. You can't get yourself together. Anything else from chapter 6 with anyone?
I do have a, I guess it may or may not be a question, but how I know here in my Bible, they call it chapter 6 and 14. It's the law of the meat offering when it should be meal. Even the my Bible, it says literally it should be meal. It led me for so many years to believe, even though I saw the fine flour and grain, I thought that this was put with the meat for real. I thought that it was placed with the meat. I really did, because of that, having that that word meat there.
Right.
You know, until you get other translations of the scripture.
Right. I mean, that's just the subtlety of misleading. When you're dealing with translations, you got people with agendas at the same time.
Yeah, this is what I want to ask. What do you think? Can you think of what the agenda here was for calling this meat?
To take the bread of life away from the people.
Wow.
I mean, you know, the kingdom has had violence committed against it since the days of Mashiyach, right? Even before that. And so you got to understand there's an intent to supplant, into mislead and deceive. In Revelation 12, it says this serpent, this devil, this dragon of old has deceived the entire world. And so these worldly systems which deal with these translations, right, are not always genuine in their attempt to translate these words. And so, so doing, they can mingle it with a little leaven, which leavens a whole bunch. Just by mistranslating one word from meal to meat. Now, you could say meat just means meal. People could say that. You can argue that point, but like you're completely shadowing what the principle is about this grain offering. This is called the Mencha offering. So when we go to Blue Letter Bible and we look at what this is really about, that was verse 14, right?
Yes.
So I do believe that's the Mencha. They call it meat offering here. Mencha, right? You don't gotta tell us, just go. Mencha is an unused root, meaning to apportion, to bestow, a donation, euphemistically a tribute, specifically a sacrificial offering, usually bloodless and voluntary. But again, if you want people to think of the offering as strictly bloody, and everything does require blood, this may be the idea that they have. They're missing it. But even here, they call it a meat offering. The gift, the oblation, the meat offering, the present, the sacrifice. But this here is not a meat offering. Mencha is a meal offering. Mencha.
In my mind, it also causes you to like the conversation at the offering, that is done away with, it keeps you, as you said, keeps our mind on everything was blood. Nothing else to be bought to Yah but an animal. And if there was grain, because then I always misunderstood verse 21 when it says in a pan it should be made with oil. I really thought they were putting the flour on top of the meat. And for a long time I did. So I can't say it's been a while, but I could say even into my coming of understanding that I still had that misunderstanding about it.
I'm going to put this here in the chat so you all can have this here.
Okay. Torah for that.
So this is meaning the tributary gift. It's the fifth type of korban or the offering. It's applied to offerings of both agricultural produce and animals. But in the korbanic legislation, it strictly refers to grain offerings, right? So when we're dealing with Talmud, when we're dealing with Mishnah, we're dealing with the jurisprudence of the Torah, this is strictly related to grain offerings. Generally, it's comprised of semolina wheat and olive oil with some frankincense spice or levana added. It could be offered in several varieties, raw, oven baked, in either a thick or thin preparation, fried or on a griddle, or deep fried in a pan. A fistful is burned on the altar, and the remainder is eaten by the male priest within the sanctuary. The laws of Mencha are delineated in Vayikra chapter 2, and later from the Kohanic perspective in 6, 7 through 11. Okay? So you all can check this out here. The chametz, of course, is dealing with the leaven. The chometz, that's not chametz, slika, that's something else. The fistful is burned on the altar. Okay. So you all can look into that for more information about the Mencha offering, which is a meal offering, specifically, again, as we're dealing with Mishnah and the legislation surrounding it is dealing typically with what it says here is grain. Okay. Selah. Good point, Iman. Way to bring that up. But this is again the bread of life. We're bringing the bread of life back to Yah. We're returning ourselves to Yah. We're offering ourselves to Yah as the living offerings as well. This is a sinless offering, though.
Can I ask the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it be the understanding of that in Psalms 50, 13 and 14, maybe?
Let's take a look at what Psalm 50, 13 and 14 is saying. Psalm 50, 13 and 14. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer thanksgiving to Elohim and pay your vows to the Most High. Selah. To think about.
So would that mean it's that it would be meatless? It would be the grain offering. Is that what that verse is basically saying?
Well, no, in this he's speaking about offering ourselves in chapter 50. This is really about us becoming the living offering. Offer thanksgiving to Elohim and pay your vows to the Most High. So what we're supposed to do for Yah and with Yah and to Yah, do it, right? And be thankful in everything that you do. So this is speaking about our heart condition. So he's like, you know what, just like Abraham again. Abraham did not bring offerings because Abraham became the offering. And Satan, not knowing what had taken place, sought to exploit that before Yah and accuse him of something. He's the accuser of the brethren. And so for us, this is about us understanding how to become the sacrifice. So as we're studying these sacrifices today, this is what we are to do with ourselves. This is how we are to prepare ourselves to present ourselves to Yah. This is meticulous. This is something that is not just haphazardly done, because here's the problem. Most so-called believers are very casual in their approach to Yah. They're very casual. But Yah is not a casual entity. Yah is a very formal, orderly, and majestic entity that requires us to enter into a mind of formality, right? Of order, and know what it is to present ourselves to a majestic entity. And again, because we live in a republic, so to speak, not so to speak, but you know what this country is designed as, they'll deceive you, make you think it's a democracy, but it's really a republic, another story. And we don't know what it is to be in a monarchy or in a kingdom. We don't know what it's like to have a king come into our presence. We have no clue. Even when you're dealing with a president or a congressman or a senator, yeah, there's some fanfare and hoopla, but I guarantee you it's not the same as approaching royalty. It's nowhere near the same. We don't even know what it's like to approach royalty. But we too are royal, and that's another thing. We don't even know how to conduct ourselves as royals. That's what's so interesting about Kansas City. We got all these names: chiefs, monarchs, royals, kings. We got all these names of these sports leagues, but here it is. You don't have many people operating in that mentality. And they're telling you what you are, if you understand it. Just food for thought. Anything else from chapter 6? All right, let's go on to chapter 7. Now we're dealing with the guilt offering again. This is a required offering. Okay. What distinguishes the guilt and the sin offering from the other free will offerings? Anybody know?
I don't know. It's seeming like if there's so many, I get them mixed up sometimes. It seems like the fat and the N words all of that is taken away.
It's burned
But
up.
they are burnt on the altar.
Right.
So does that make it different from another offering where they're not burned?
Somewhat, but not entirely. Because when you're dealing with the burnt offering, you got everything going up, right?
Okay.
But what makes this different is verse 6.
Oh, okay.
Whereas other offerings, if it's, let's say, a peace offering, the offerer is able to eat from it.
Okay,
But
I see.
because this is a guilt or a sin offering, only the priest can eat of it now, right? Because it's most set apart. And think about it, the offerer has to truly self-abnegate now because you've just committed a trespass. So what can you derive from something you're offering up to atone from you? You have to completely give that up.
Oh, I see.
So you're not going to get to partake from that. This is something that the priest is only able to eat now. Other offerings can be eaten. The other free will offerings, you can share those with the priest. Again, the sin and the guilt offering, only the priest can eat those. Every male among the priests eat it, right? It is eaten in the set apart place because no common person, no person outside of the Levitical tribe can go into the holy place or the Holy of Holies. You can only eat this in the holy precinct. That's because that's where the work is to be done. So let's take this now to the next step. Let's look at this spiritually. What is that spiritually saying? What is the spiritual meaning of that?
I guess what came into my mind was that you need the word that I had in my mind was intercessor, but you need someone to offer your offering of sin for your sin. You can't just eradicate it yourself.
True, very true, very true. Now keep in mind when we read what holiness was about, and they talked about how the human body is the temple, that there are only certain points that we have access to at certain times, right? But given the work that we put in, like if we become a priest, because keep in mind, in Mashiyach, is there male and female? Is there male and female in Messiah? Yes, no.
I say no.
Right. In the Messiah, there's neither male nor female. There's neither slave nor free. There's neither Yehudi or Greek. Everything is one in Yah. You watch her. Just watch her. So everything being one in the Messiah, when we become, because remember, the Messiah also makes us priests to his Elohim. So we can have access to this if we do the work that's required. So this is very important for us to understand. Once we reach to a certain point and this guilt offering is made and completed, really, because there's only one. Now here's the question. How was this fulfilled? Thanks, Mom. How was this fulfilled? You go get them. Leave both of them on. Let's take a look at this. So let's look at verse 11. This is Hebrews 9:11. Messiah, right? Having become a high priest of the coming good matters, through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, entered into the most set apart place once and for all, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, having sprinkling the defiled sets apart for the cleansing of the flesh. How much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? And because of this, he is the mediator of a renewed covenant, so that death having taken place for redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, those who are called might receive the promise of the everlasting inheritance. Right? So this is the fulfillment of this. When we read chapter 9, really like 7 through 11, 7 through 10, I mean, this is where you will see the fulfillment of the Levitical priesthood. Hebrews chapter 7 through 11 restores the order of Melchizedek and explains how the fulfillment of the Levitical how it took place with the work. And so understanding that this is something that we allow to take place within our being. Okay. We go from our courtyard, which is dealing with, honestly, our pelvis area down. We're not acting like this anymore. Now we're going in our torso. We're doing the work of the heart right here. We're doing the work of getting our emotional and our desires all mastered. Looking at this practically, which then allows for us to get our thoughts in alignment. And to remember, holiness is a mindset. And so this is what we actually prepare ourselves for. You okay? Any thoughts, questions, comments? Come on, I need that plugged in. Unplug the other one. All right. Any other thoughts? So we have the peace offering as well. We deal with the guilt offering. We bring a peace offering. Remember, there's 5. Can someone name what the 5 offerings are? What are the 5 offerings?
Uh-oh.
You don't have to say them in Hebrew, just even in English.
Oh.
What are the 5 offerings in the English? Chapters 1 through 5.
Burn
offering, good.
Meat.
Or what's another word for it?
Meal offering.
Meal offering.
Sin.
The sin.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, there's a peace offering. Mosiah said peace offering.
Peace
and then,
there, I forgot that.
And then what's the
And
last
the guilt,
one?
the guilt,
offering. Great. So those are the 5 offerings, right? You have Olah, elevation or burnt offering, Mencha, the meal offering. You have the Shalamim or the peace offering, which are the free will offerings. Those are the free will offerings. And then the required offerings are the Chetet or the sin offering and the Yasham and the guilt offering. Okay, so when we keep all these in mind, we can understand which offerings, even to this day, still remain. Which offerings have been done away with? Go ahead.
the sin offering, and
The sin offering and
the guilt offering.
the guilt offering. Those are done away with. Why?
Because the Messiah came to, and he was killed for that. That's what he came for.
Amen. So he
The
completed
sacrifice.
it. He fulfilled that aspect of the Torah, right? He made himself the perfect sin offering in fulfillment of what was said back in Genesis 23, I believe it was. It's 22. In verse 8. Let's go. This, what Mashiyach fulfilled is this here. Yitzhak, going to verse 7, spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, Abba. And he said, here I am, my son. And he says, see the fire and the wood. But where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Now, this is the complete elevation offering it's talking about. Abraham said, Bani, my son, Elohim does provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. But really, when you read this in Hebrew, it says Elohim does provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So the my son comes at the end of this sentence, letting you know who the lamb is. The lamb is my son. So this is what fulfills and completes the sin and guilt offerings of the Levitical sacrificial order, which were the sin and guilt offerings done, were they instituted to be eternal? You say no? Which one? Okay, so no, they weren't. Keeping in mind, again, the sin and guilt offerings were instituted as remedies, as rectifications for human nature. There was not a sin and guilt offering prior to Leviticus chapter 1. Even when you're dealing with Adam and Hawa in the garden, it was not understood to be something that was instituted. It was a concession. It wasn't law. It became law right here in this book in response to human nature. So this is very important. So we're dealing with the peace offerings as well, the grain offerings, and these are the laws associated with them, okay? And this is where you're dealing with the food that is not to be eaten after the third day, right? Whatever is left of the flesh of the slaughtering on the third day is burned with fire, because there is no decomposition in this. Remember, this transformation is about purity, it's about incorruption, it's about immortality. And so when we're dealing with these principles, we're dealing with the transformation of the body of the Messiah. Anything that touches it which is unclean is not eaten. It's burned with fire. This is talking about Gehenna. This is talking about judgment. This is talking about condemnation. As for the clean flesh, verse 19, all who are clean eat of it. Bye. Go to room. You think it's a game. So then stop laughing. Bye. When you're ready, you can come back out. You need to know? You go to a different. All right. So again, looking at those who eat of this, there are excisions that take place for those who are not ritually prepared. Excuse me one second, you all.
Hello?
Wait for a second.
All
I'll be
right,
right
thank
back.
you all. So again, there are ways to get cut off in being in a state of uncleanness, right? Verse 21, when a being who touches that which is unclean, of the uncleanness of man, of beast, or swarming creature, and shall eat the flesh of the peace offering that belongs to Yah, that being cut off from his people. So this lets us know cleanliness is important. Now here's the question. Those are not hold, bend your elbow. You. No, you good. You keep on. What makes something clean?
The Torah. Right?
Okay, pretty much. And this is what the rule. You got to put your chest down to the ground. That's a better. We got some little immature people over here that think everything is funny. Right.
We understand.
You're not. All right, so we don't have anyone eating blood. Of course, the blood contains the life. This goes back to Genesis chapter 9 with Noah. So the fire of the peace offering, right? This is something that we bring with our own hands to Yah. And this is a wave offering. What is the symbol? What is a wave offering for?
Is it symbolic of Yeshua's rising?
Excellent point. Go ahead. Can you expound on that some more?
I guess the wave offering is waved up to Yah like an offering. First, what part is it? The shoulder? Let me look at this now. Oh, the wave offering is the breast, right?
Correct.
So that's the heart of the man, a heart of the mankind. But then the shoulder, that I didn't understand that part for the heave. Now, what do they do with the heave offering then?
I think that's something that is thrown. I have to look at that some more because if you heave something, you're like either
right.
So we'll see.
Okay.
So these are waves. So the wave offering is that which is presented to the Most High. Okay. It means to shake, lift, swing, or brandish. Putting all these shades of meaning together, one can gain an insight into what took place when an offering was waved. It was being offered and lifted and shaken or brandished and then swung away first to the eternal and then back to the priest. Let's see. It's placed in the hands. Let me go and see.
And the high priest did the waving, of course, or
right,
a
so
priest.
Yes, ma'am. A group of people is presented as a wave offering, a gift to the priesthood to be used in the service of the tabernacle, and they are identified as typical firstborn or first fruits. So this is about presenting that which you present or offering to the temple before the Most High. You're waving it to show the Most High that this is an acceptable first fruit or firstborn offering. So that wave offering is important. It's very symbolic of the barley harvest, the first fruits of the barley harvest, and the first fruits even of the wheat harvest. Okay. So very important to conceptualize there. So there are anointed portions for the anointed priests, which are relative to specific people. So now you're dealing with portions that are set aside. So this is even like when we look at, let's say, Shemini Atzeret, right? The 8th day, the last day, right? What, do some, get to 100 squats. You don't come back and do 100 push-ups. No, they're doing squats. They're doing squats. They don't got crunch. What is the signification of the 8th day of Tabernacles, what they call the last great day of Shemini Atzeret? What is the significance of the 8th day?
Isn't that like the total ingathering of the saints there?
Well, whose day is that for specifically? The 8th day is portion to a specific group. The 7th day brings in everybody. The 8th day is specifically for who?
Specifically for
The 12 tribes.
Yes, this is specifically for Israel. So it's a portion specifically for Israel. So when we're dealing with these offerings, they're very symbolic of specifications for certain groups. So when we're dealing with this 8th day, it doesn't really get into it in Leviticus 23, but nonetheless, this 8th day is specifically for Israel. This is the special day set aside for Israel as the first fruits of Yah's people. Okay, he chose Israel first over all the other nations. And so that a portion, anointed portion for Aaron and for the anointed portion for his sons is very symbolic. Again, keep in mind, all 12 tribes are supposed to be priests. 100? 200 total, they got 2 sets of 100. And so this is related to Israel as the anointed nation. Remember, Israel is supposed to be a messianic nation. Not just one person, not just a messianic figure as an individual. This is about a messianic nation, which is the reality of Israel being the light to the Gentiles. You better get down deeper than that. Yes. Go down slower and blow up. All right, so you have the burnt offering, grain offering, sin offering, the guilt offering, and the peace offering. So here you have all 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? So there are instructions relative to each of these offerings that allow for them to be acceptable before Yah, which again goes back to the days of Chabel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, when Abel brought a offering that was acceptable to Yah, but Cain did not, okay, because he didn't follow the instructions that were relative to them. So this is where we have to understand this relates to our worship of Yah today. There are still specific instructions that we have to follow. We can't lean on our own understanding and think that we can serve Yah in spirit and truth. We cannot. We have to be able to know what says Yah. What is the prophetic word for this form of worship? Mo, check outside for me. Sit down, bro. Okay, anything else from chapter 7? this out my store. Anything else from 7? All right, so chapter 8. Sorry, what are you doing? For what? Huh? Drink some water and go. I don't care. All right, so chapter 8 now, you're dealing with the washing of the priest. You're dealing with the ordination, washing of the water and the blood, and the anointing. You're dealing with the oil as well. So now you bring the garments, the oil, the bull for the sin offering, 2 rams, the basket of unleavened bread, and everybody is to witness this. Okay, everybody is to witness this ordination. And this ordination is very important because now we have a visible priesthood. This lets us know ourselves, what does that speak to us? How does that speak to us? What is the composite for our day and time relative to the ordination of the priests during the days of the tabernacle?
I think that we still have to follow the steps.
Okay.
We still have to cleanse or turn from our ways that are not like Yah. We have to now gird ourselves or change our covering,
Right,
so to speak.
right.
And
that comes from what though? What does that come from? Where does that initiate?
well, the change, it comes from the study of the word.
Yes, ma'am. Which is the mind. Right? You transform the mind.
Change your
Not
ways.
conform to the world, but be transformed by the
Renewing of your mind.
Right. So when we're doing this, and we're going through this ordination, so to speak, and we're presenting ourselves to Yah as living offerings, within the world, the transformative impact, the anointing on us, so to speak, right? You'll see the presence of Yah on us, and you'll see also the divining of powers of Yah, the prophetic reality of Yah's word in, on, and through us, which is what the breastplate and the Urim and Tumim symbolize. You get the unmistakable revelation of Yah through the Urim and Tumim, the light and the brilliance. So when you look at all these things here, the long shirt, this is the righteousness of Israel girded with the girdle. This is dealing with protecting against sexual sin. The robe is the familial line. The shoulder garment is the yoke that we have in Yah's kingdom, embroidered with the shoulder garment as well, tied with the shoulder garment. The breastplate, of course, the right heart state in terms of dealing with the word in us. The Urim and Tumim are the lights and the brilliances. This is the presence of Yah on us. The turban, of course, is the mind of Yah, and the golden plate, which is set apart to Yah. Kadosh la Yahuwah, Baruch Hashem. So this is the entire armor of Elohim that we are to gird ourselves with. When you look at the high, you're looking at the armor of Elohim. Put on the entire armor of Elohim. What did the priest use to slaughter the offering.
Hmm.
What do they use? Yeah, they're like the lamb, the bull. What do they cut the throat with? Or a sword.
Mm-hmm.
Take up the sword of the sword. So they were girded with swords, and plus they were ready for war, so they had swords too. All right, y'all can get that. Ain't no break. Let's go. Break it. Yeah, that's the 200. Go pee and come back. So this oil was anointed in the tabernacle, the dwelling place, all that was in it, and it was set apart, right? And then you poured it on oil on Aaron's head, you set him apart. Then you put it on his sons, right? Then they made these offerings. They washed them first. So here's the thing. What was the first judgment?
I can't hear you.
What element was involved with the first judgment? What element?
What element was involved with the first what?
Judgment on earth. As a worldwide
Oh, water.
water. So notice you wash the animal, you cleanse it with water before you do what?
Anointed with oil.
Not anointed with oil. You burn it with fire.
Okay.
What is it?
Hell. You went out. Okay.
What is the judgment supposed to be on
On earth, fire.
fire? So you can see how this sacrificial system, it points to everything. It points to the atonement and the redemption of the world. But in redeeming the world, you have to get rid of the impurities.
Which would be the fat.
The fat, exactly. Exactly. And so all this here is very relevant. Count inside your ear. Don't think it's you got 2 seconds. About more than 10 seconds. And so with this here, we're now dealing with how the world is to become pure, how the world is supposed to come to be the kingdom of heaven on earth. Help for yourself. So this anointing oil is very important as relates to the consecration of the priesthood to fulfill their duty. The anointing of the Spirit for us is vital as relates to consecrating us, fulfilling our duties as a messianic kingdom to this world and bringing the world into the light of Yah. And all this is done here. It says, do not go outside the door of the tent of meeting for 7 days, speaking to Moshe and Aaron, until the days of your ordination are completed, for he fills your hands for 7 days. What does this 7 days represent? What does this represent?
Well, it represents creation.
Yes, the completion of creation, though. You're dealing with the 7,000 years we will usher in what age? What age will 7,000 years usher in? What is the age that will ensue after the year 7,000? 7,000. When they push up. What age will that ensue? What will ensue after the year 7,000?
Is that the millennium?
Yes, or it's also known as the Messianic age.
Messianic age. Mhm.
So now we're dealing with the age of the Messiah. We're dealing with 1,000-year reign of life in life. No death, right? No chaos, no disease, all life. And so as we deal with that, this is what this is pointing to. And all this is done to make atonement for us. Now the world has atonement. And this is what the key is. Stay at the door of the tent of meeting day and night for 7 days. You shall guard the duty of Yah and not die, for so I have been commanded. So this is where we are able to keep life. If we guard the duty of Yah and we stay in his presence day and night for 7 days. Each day of the week requires us to be in Yah's presence. If we think that we can get by one day outside of Yah's presence, we are sadly fooling ourselves. And then Aaron and his sons did all the words that Yah had commanded by the hand of Moshe. This is why Yahushua tells us it's so important for us to keep the words of Moshe. It's so important. Let's see.
Sorry, I had to step out for a minute. I hope I
Oh,
didn't
you
miss
good? You good, brother? You good? I think it may be 7:65. All right, let's go back to 7. It's not 6, maybe 5. All right, so they did everything. Leviticus 8 closes with Aaron and his sons did all the words that Yah had commanded by the hand of Moshe. This is how important this is. Yahushua says in John chapter 5, verse 45, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. Okay? There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you have set your expectation. But if you believe Moshe, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how shall you believe my words? In order for us to rightly divide the word of truth and to understand what Yahushua spoke, we have to know what Moshe taught. Or else everything that we think that we know will be completely in the dark. Nothing that we will understand that Yahushua said will be clarified unless we understand what Moshe had wrote and said. That is the only way. Even this is what the Master himself spoke. This is not just my opinion. This is what Yahushua said. You can't believe his words if you don't believe Moshe's writings. It's impossible. This is why Moshe is so important. This is why we read the Torah every year from Genesis to Leviticus to Deuteronomy. This is why we read that every year. Any other thoughts for chapter 8? Yes, yeah. All right, let's go back to Jeremiah 7. So this is what everything comes down to. Verse 23. The word I did command them, saying, obey my voice, and I shall be your Elohim, and you be my people. walk in all the ways that I have commanded you so that it will be well with you. This is the key to everything. But Israel's problem, our problem to this day, is that we don't obey or incline our ear. We don't listen to Yah. We don't want to even hear what Yah has to say many times. Whose counsels were walked in? This is what Psalm 1 talks about. Right? Do not walk in the counsel of the wicked. But guess what people have a tendency to do? Or the counsel of the wrong. This is the counsel that Jeremiah is talking about. They walked in the counsels of the wrong, in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and went backward, not forward. This is where Israel has the problem. This is where all people of faith have a problem. We want to be self-righteous. We don't want to be righteous to God. And so these sacrificial systems are about burning up anything that is not of Yah on the altar, so that we can actually be before Yah and present the right way. Those are push. Where's the show? Where's the show? So now, 20. Exactly. What do you have, Messiah? Get it done. Let's go. Anything from the prophet Jeremiah stand out to anybody? Anybody know what Ben Hinnom is? Anybody ever heard the valley of the son of Hinnom? Anybody know what this is? What this is today?
I've heard of it, but I never quite understood what it was, though.
Well, you may have heard Gehenna or Gehenna before. You know what that is?
Yeah, that it sounds familiar.
Where death is.
Something like that.
That's not the Gilligad. Where Christ, where Yahshua was crucified, is it?
That's Golgotha.
That's Golgotha. Okay.
It's the valley that surrounds Jerusalem.
This was where actually it was a place of refuge, but the people started burning their sons and daughters in this valley as well. This is what he was talking about. But this is where we can understand the idea for the lake of fire to come from. This is the Hebraic understanding of quote unquote hell. Okay. This is the lake of fire that burns where the fire is not quenched nor the worm never dies. This is what that reference is to here. Okay.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, sir.
That there was a place that was right on the outside of Jerusalem where they I think it was at the time when the Romans had went into had conquered and ruled, but there was a place where they kind of threw dead bodies.
Right here.
That's the same place?
Right here.
Okay. Yeah.
Right here.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Sorry to interrupt you. Okay.
No, you're good. You got to get an understanding. This is the place where they sacrifice people at the same time. This was a very idolatrous place, but it was end up becoming a place of refuge as well. So in the New Testament, Yeshua used the word Gehenna to describe the opposite to life, okay? The term was used 11 times in the writings. This is the place where both soul and body could be destroyed in unquenchable fire, right? So you can see the instances here. The Beatitudes is used 3 times, right? So this is where Gehenna has its idea, or the lake of fire has its idea from. The valley of the son of Hinnom. Okay. Now keep in mind, this is about fire. This is the other fire that burns forever that we do not want to deal with. This is the second death. You go to Gehenna, you're going into the second death. Okay. And so this is where we do not want to be. We need to keep the fire burning for Yah so that this does not allow us to experience the fires that burn for the wicked and the wrong. So that's the subtle distinction. Subtle but major. And when you look at what's going on, even today, you're seeing that people are preferring death to life. You see that today. In subtleties, you see commercials of unclean food being promoted, which is defiling the body and making them unclean. Remember, an unclean person cannot eat of Yah's offerings. So these subtle things that we're reading about and that we're seeing in the world, that the world is promoting, it doesn't promote a holy culture. So to serve God, we have to be clean, we have to be holy. Let's go, Messiah. And so as we deal with Matthew now, and we look at Yahushua healing people, bringing them back to life, right? Seeking out those in need of healing, which is what the priests really did. They were the doctors, right? But again, compassion and not offer. This is what Yah desires. He desires for us to be more compassionate than to bring an offering to a temple. He wants you to be the offering. And all this is about resurrection. At the end of the day, this is all resurrection and healing, right? She just touched the tzitzit of his garment and she was healed. So these are the things that the contain within them. They help us understand what it means to be clean and pure and holy. They help us understand what it means corruptible to incorruptible, to go from mortal to immortality, ultimately. This is the transmutation that we are to undergo by understanding the laws of the offerings. Understanding how we are to present ourselves to Yah. You can't just go to Yah in prayer, just cold and impure and out of connection with Yah. You have to be connected and set apart. And very formal in the process and clean. Any closing thoughts from anyone else? All right. We will go ahead and close out in prayer. We do have a family event this evening that we're going to be getting into, so this does kind of help us out a little bit as well. So we will close this out in prayer, and then we will proceed on Wednesday, Yom Revi'i, with language and prayer. And then we'll pick back up next Shabbat with the next Parashat, which is Parashat. Let's see what comes after Tsav. Is Shemini, which is the 8th day. you handle your business, you won't have to experience it. All right, so in the spirit of prayer, hallelujah. Aleinu l'shabeach le'adon hakol latet gedula layetzir breshit shelo sanu kegoy haratzot velo samanu b'mishpachot hadama shalo sam halchenu kahim ve'gor aleinu kakol hamonam ve'anachnu korim u'mishtachoim u'modim Lifnei melech melki hamalakim hakadosh baruch hu shehu notei shamayim veyesod haaretz umeshov yakra'o b'shamayim mima'al shachinat ozo b'gobohai borumim u'eloheinu einod et makenu efes zolatov kakatuv b'torato vayadata hayom v'heshuvota elevavacha ki yahuahu ha'elohim בשמיים, בעל ועל הארץ מתחת עינות. אל כן נקבה לך יהוה אלוהינו לראות מחרה ותפארת עוזך. לחבר גוללים מן הארץ והללים קרות יכרתון. לתקן עולם, גם מלכות שדי וכל בני בשר יקראו בשמך. להפונות אלוקי קודשי ארץ. Ruva yodeu kol yesve tabak ki lecha tikara kol barek tishaba kol lashon lefaneka Yahu Eloheinu yekera uve yifalu lechaboshim ka yachayatanu v'yikabalu kolam et el malchuteka v'timlok elahim mahara le'olam vayed ki hamelchut shelcha hi ule'elemi et timlok v'chavod kakatu b'toratecha Yahuwah yimlok le'olam vayed v'ne'emar b'chaya Yahuwah lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yihye Yahuwah echad u'shemo echad.
We can't hear him.
And so we open to splendor. That you will sweep our down the way so that all humanity will for our name. And all earth will return to you and them. Then all who live will know that you, every knee must bend, every tongue must voice throughout the life. They all bow and worship. May they give honor to your Lord. May everyone reign over all soon and forever all time. Sovereignty is born to be now and forever. Blessed is the God. Adonai reigns forever. Such is God. Adonai shall not earth. On that day, Adonai blood one.
Hallelujah. Gava Yekadesh Better Amen. Yamadi Varakerote Vayamelik Malkute. Bechayachun of Yamichun, Chayeda Kol Beit Israel, Bagalavis Mankari, Vimiru, Amen. Yeheshme Rabba Mevorak, Leolam Ulmeamaya, Yitbarak, Vayishtabach, Aviroman, Vayinase, Vihadavi Dele, Vihitala, Seme, the Kudisha, Beriku, Elamin Kol Barakatava, Shirata, Spekatava, Nekmatad, Amiran, Bama, Vimiru, Amen. Yehesh Lamar Rabba Shamaya B'Chaim Aleinu V'Yakol Israel V'Miru Amen. Osei Shalom V'Miromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Israel V'Miru Amen. Rechacha Yahuwah V'Yishmarecha Ya'er Yahuwah Panav Alecha V'Yihunecha Yisai Yahuwah Panav Alecha V'Yisim Lecha Shalom. May Yah bless you and keep you. May Yah cause His countenance to shine upon you and be kind to you. Yah lift up His face unto you and give you peace. Hallelujah.